these patients have so much pain after discharge is because, again, they just get Tylenol and an NSAID. But that also, we didn't get the data. Nevertheless, Henry Kellett and I wrote an editorial for this paper. And in the process, we contacted the authors. And I realized that there was so many issues is that they had these so-called pain-free hospitals. And the pain scores from the patients who were in this pain-free hospital after they were discharged were higher than those who came out from the so-called regular hospitals. So as we were discussing yesterday, that may be one of the major reasons why patients had higher pain is because they expected no pain after discharge.
Or to make my numbers look good at my pain-free hospital, I don't give any opioids, right?
Yeah.
So I send you home with inadequate pain relief.
Correct.
But, yeah.
So that was what we really.
It
was a large database actually, and they looked at a huge number of surgical procedures. So the take-home message from this basically is that pain is still inadequately treated, and even the recent data shows that. So now let's look at the systematic review as to how do we optimize this, and what was used in these two databases. I don't have the details. In other words, the New York, California database, I don't know what the patients got. We just know that they were readmitted. So we looked at the outcome, readmission as an outcome. But we have no idea what. My guess is they just got some sort of opioid plus NSAID or opioid plus acetaminophen. So our first effort to systematic review, and this is from Prospect Group, was basically looking at pain after lap choles. In fact, that was the first procedure we looked at. At that time, we did a formal systematic review of all the studies published related to pain from 66. That's when all these databases were put together, to 2005. We looked at the usual Medlines, MBASE, Cochrane review, etc., Cochrane protocols, and we identified 289 studies then, of which 121 were included and 169 were excluded. The most common reason for exclusion here was basically lack of pain scores in those older studies. And this is what we basically came up with, the recommendations then. And keep in mind, initially we were heavily, Prospect had more surgeons than there were anesthesiologists. So the approach looking at what is pre-op for them was pre-incision. Rather than for us, normally pre-op is before the patient comes to the OR. So you will see some stuff here which is after the patient is in the OR. Example, in the pre-op, they're looking at long-acting local anesthetic wound infiltration. But that's not how we define pre-op, so I just want to clarify that. What was recommended then prior to surgery is either a COX-2 inhibitor orally, gabapentin, and dexamethasone IV, and then infiltration. We also in those days looked at anesthetic technique. Now it's just a moot point. I mean, everybody gets general anesthesia, but keep in mind in those days there were some patients who were receiving just neuraxial analgesia, that is anesthesia, that is lap choles, were done under epidural analgesia and spinal anesthesia in those days. Yeah, so that this part is all gone. Nobody does that anymore. And again, we recommended low pressures, saline lavage, and then NSAIDs, COX-2s, if it was not given pre-op, give it intra-op, and then post-op again, NSAIDs, COX-2s, paracetamol is acetaminophen, and opioids for rescue.
What about muscle relaxants?
Not recommended.
Yeah.
In fact, yesterday we were just discussing, even for spine surgical procedures, we used to use muscle laxant because most common cause of pain is basically muscle spasms after spine surgery. Yeah. Now I've developed a practice where our surgeons will infiltrate the muscles itself, and Emerson actually brought it to my notice because Emerson told me that for his hips and knees, he had started injecting the muscles and he found excellent pain relief. Not only that, ambulation was increased. So I started doing that for our spine surgery patient, and it's working fantastic because muscle relaxants may work a little bit, but the side effect profile, so the balance of sedation with that relaxation is a problem. We don't know how the patient will react. More importantly, we have our general anesthesia restful effects, and when you give them muscle relaxant post-op, they could be more groggy post-op.
And I was also thinking of intra-op paralysis.
Oh, okay, that muscle relaxation.
Yeah.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
No, I'm glad you mentioned that, both. But yeah,
Okay,
intra-op
so that I can tell you is a Merck issue. So I know at Sages, Merck had an industry session at your meeting. In fact, I took the Merck guys to task for that. I'll give you a little background what Brian is asking for. Merck has a new drug called Sugammadex, which is a reversal of neuromuscular blockers, which we normally use. In fact, I had done all the studies for Sugammadex before it got FDA approved in the mid-2000. But then it was not approved, though the rest of the world had it, and just 2 years ago it got approved by the FDA after 15 years. And so now they're trying to create, Sugammadex, by the way, is $300 drug. Okay, neostigmine, which is what we normally use to reverse muscle relaxant, is $10 drug. There's no question that once Sugammadex goes off patent, we will use it routinely. Neostigmine will not be used ever. It is a great drug. How it works is it engulfs the muscle relaxant, steroidal muscle relaxant molecule in the blood and makes it ineffective. In fact, I met the guy who came up with this idea, and it's fascinating. It was a drug by Organon, if you remember Organon, the old days. Yeah. So, we use these, I forget the name for cleaning, the sprays you have for cleaning, which they say that it completely takes all the odors away, and it's not just masks the odor, it removes the odor. What is that? I forget the name now.
I forget, but I know Febreze or something like that.
Febreze.
Yeah.
You know how Febreze works? It basically engulfs the odors, the molecules that cause odors.
Really?
So that's how he came up with this idea. And so it is an excellent drug, there's no question. It has zero residual effects post-op.
So why did it take 15 years to become?
Oh, there's a long story behind that. Maybe lunchtime.
Okay. I assume there was something wrong with it.
No. Okay, I'll briefly mention it. So Organon had another drug, which was a muscle laxant, which they were trying to replace succinylcholine. Succinylcholine has large side effects, but we need a shorter-acting muscle laxant. So they came up with a shorter-acting muscle laxant, and we have two groups of muscle laxants, steroidals and so-called, others. Steroidal muscle laxants cause no histamine release and no anaphylaxis, while the others do cause some histamine release. This new drug, which they proposed, they spent $800 million to get to market. It got to the market, and though I was telling them, I used to do huge number of studies then, that this drug can cause histamine release, they wouldn't listen, and they started blaming us for doing a sloppy data collection. It got to the market, and within a week, 5 patients died where they got significant histamine release, bronchospasm, which could not be relieved. So the drug was taken off the market. When Sugammadex was studied, we again found that. And even now we know that Sugammadex can cause histamine release. And therefore, with FDA burnt previously, they asked Organon to do a larger study looking at basically anaphylaxis in the U.S. population. The study was done where they did, those tests, skin tests and all, and then was submitted to the FDA, but one of the centers falsified the data. So that was thrown out, and they had to redo the whole thing. So that's what it took so long. In the meantime, Organon got bought by Glaxo got then sold out the drug to